Well, I'd like to start by congratulating IBEC on its submission. It's not often we get to read such a fine work of fiction at these committee meetings, but it really does read like a different world. The world that you live in is the world that says that the meat industry did everything right at the right time and in the right way, that there were no issues to do with health and safety at the plant, the perfect community with happy workers, empathetic employers. But it is a bit of a mystery to us, because all of the other evidence we've had from the Migrant Rights Centre, from ICTU, from SIPTU, from the Workers' Union, show us that there's a different kind of world that those workers inhabit. And on the 1st of May and the 2nd of May, the Guardian newspaper, quite a reputable newspaper, did a series of articles on the outbreaks at the Irish meat plants, because it was quite stark. Now, if the first case came to the attention of the meat plants on the 17th of March, the protocols were imposed on you till the 19th or 20th of May. That gives you a good 6 to 8 weeks in which there was a spike in the outbreak of coronavirus in the meat plants. Up to 1,000 workers were infected. So how do you explain that? If everything was hunky-dory and done right, there has to be an explanation. And you talk about the provision of masks, of PPE, of social distancing, and yet if you read the record from that newspaper, from the horse's mouth, so to speak, from the migrant workers who worked there, they didn't have personal protective equipment, there was no social distancing, they weren't provided with gloves or masks, but you insist that that was the case. Now, either it's fiction or you're being totally defensive, like Lady Macbeth, who methinks the lady doth protest too much, and I think the latter is the case. I assume that IBEC believe in science, and I assume that they employ people to research the industries that they look after. And if so, could you please tell me, have they looked at any of the science and research that's been done across the world in relation to meat plants? For example, Johns Hopkins University, the Davis University in California, studies done in the Netherlands and Germany, because it is interesting. It's not really a mystery why meat plants are particularly susceptible. If you read those studies carried out by scientists, they'd show you clearly, and those who would be familiar with the meat industry, as I assume you guys are, would know that low temperatures allow the virus to stay viable outside the body for longer, increasing the survival of the virus in the air, and that increases the risk of infection in meat plants. Social and economic factors also supply. They are by nature exhausting, dangerous, labour-intensive jobs done primarily by underpaid migrant workers, and of necessity many of them live in multi-generational homes or overcrowded housing environments. All of those create a perfect storm for the spread of the virus. Now, if you haven't looked at those studies, you must be still wondering, why the hell did this happen? We did everything right, at the right time, all the time, everywhere, and yet 1,000 workers across the industry became infected. So do you ever ask yourself those questions and look for an answer? Because it doesn't strike me that you're looking for answers. I think you're trying to cover up, because all of your answers here are denial, 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 instead of acknowledging we had a problem, we had to look at where that problem came from, and now we've done everything to address it. That is, if you have done everything. So a couple of simple questions to you in relation to what is being done. I understand the 20% of the workforce that you referred to earlier and that come in here on employment permits come in through agencies. Have you spoken to those agencies about the accommodation in which those workers live? And have you urged them or proposed to them or helped them or told them to do something to rectify the overcrowded multi-generational accommodation in often isolated rural areas and where they live? And lastly, can you please answer the question that was asked of you earlier on? Do the majority of your 50 large-scale meat plants operate a sick pay scheme for these workers?